The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Chicago Peninsula Hotel suite, casting golden light across the ivory wedding dress hanging on the closet door. Sophie Bennett stood before the mirror, her chestnut hair swept into an elegant updo. Her green eyes reflecting a mixture of anticipation and something else she refused to name. Doubt, perhaps? Or maybe just the normal jitters that came with marrying one of Chicago's wealthiest businessmen. "You look absolutely stunning," her best friend Jennifer said, adjusting the delicate veil that cascaded down Sophie's back like a waterfall of silk. "Gregory is going to lose his mind when he sees you." Sophie forced a smile, studying her reflection. The dress was perfect, custom-made Italian lace that hugged her curves before flowing into a dramatic train. Everything about this day was perfect. Too perfect, maybe. She had spent the last 18 months planning this wedding with the precision she brought to her job as an event coordinator. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated. From the orchid centerpieces to the 12-piece orchestra that would play during the reception, but perfection felt hollow somehow, like a beautiful shell with nothing inside. "I still can't believe you're marrying Gregory Walsh," Jennifer continued, fluffing the train of the dress. 2 years ago, you were eating ramen noodles in your tiny apartment, and now you're about to become Mrs. Gregory Walsh? It's like a fairy tale. Sophie's smile tightened. Fairy tales were supposed to feel magical, weren't they? Instead, she felt like an actress preparing for the performance of her lifetime. Gregory was handsome, successful, and generous. He treated her well, showered her with gifts, and introduced her to a world of luxury she had never imagined. He was everything a woman should want. So why did her heart feel so empty? The answer came to her unbidden, as it always did when she let her guard down. Nathan Sterling, with his storm-gray eyes and infectious laugh. Nathan, who had kissed her under the stars during their college years and promised her the world. Nathan, who had disappeared from her life 5 years ago without explanation, leaving only a brief note that said he had to let her go. "Sophie, are you okay?" Jennifer's concerned voice pulled her back to the present. "Yes, sorry. Just thinking." Sophie shook her head, banishing the ghost of her past. Nathan was gone. This was her life now, her choice. Gregory might not set her soul on fire, but he was safe, reliable, present. That had to be enough. The church was magnificent, decorated with thousands of white roses that filled the air with their sweet perfume. As Sophie stood in the vestibule, her arm linked through her father's, she could hear the orchestra beginning the processional. Through the open doors, she could see the rows of guests. Chicago's elite gathered to witness the union of Sophie Bennett and Gregory Walsh. Her father squeezed her hand. "You sure about this, sweetheart?" Sophie looked up at him, surprised by the question. Her father, usually so practical and supportive of her decisions, had a worried expression on his weathered face. "Dad, I just want you to be happy," he said quietly. "Really happy, not just comfortable." Before Sophie could respond, the wedding coordinator signaled that it was time. The music swelled, the guests rose to their feet, and Sophie took her first. Stepped down the aisle toward her future. She never made it to the altar. Everything happened in a blur of motion and confusion. Sophie was halfway down the aisle, her eyes fixed on Gregory's proud smile, when the side doors of the church burst open. Men in dark suits swarmed in, moving with military precision. Guests screamed, some diving under pews, others frozen in shock. Sophie felt strong arms wrap around her waist, lifting her off her feet. She tried to scream, but a hand covered her mouth gently but firmly. She was being carried backward, away from Gregory, away from her wedding, away from everything she had planned. "Don't struggle," a voice whispered in her ear. A voice that sent electric shocks through her entire body because she knew that voice had heard it in her dreams for 5 years. "I'm not going to hurt you, Sophie. I promise." Nathan, the world spun as she was rushed through the side door into a waiting black SUV. The door slammed shut. The vehicle accelerated away from the church, and Sophie found herself pressed against the leather seat. Her wedding dress bunched around her, her veil askew, staring into the face of the man she had never stopped loving, Nathan Sterling. Looked different from the college student she remembered. His face had hardened, his jaw more defined, his shoulders broader. He wore an expensive charcoal suit that emphasized his powerful build, and his dark hair was styled with casual elegance. But those eyes, those storm-gray eyes that had haunted her dreams, were exactly the same. "Hello, Sophie," he said softly, and the sound of her name on his lips made her heart clench painfully. For a moment, Sophie was too stunned to speak. She just stared at him, her mind struggling to process what had just happened. This couldn't be real. Nathan couldn't be here, couldn't have just kidnapped her from her own wedding. "What?" she finally managed, her voice shaking with shock and fury. "What have you done?" "Saved you," Nathan replied calmly, though she could see tension in the set of his shoulders. "Though I doubt you'll see it that way right now. Saved me." Sophie's voice rose to a near shriek. "You just kidnapped me from my wedding. Do you have any idea what you've done? Gregory will call the police. They'll hunt you down. Let them try." Nathan's expression remained infuriatingly calm. "By the time anyone figures out where we're going, we'll be long gone." Sophie lunged toward the door handle, but Nathan caught her wrist gently. The touch of his skin against hers sent electricity racing up her arm, and she hated herself for that reaction. "Don't," he said. "We're going 70 miles an hour on the highway. Please don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." "More difficult?" Sophie jerked her hand away from his touch, pressing herself against the opposite side of the vehicle. "You kidnapped me, Nathan. On my wedding day? How could this possibly be more difficult?" "I know you're angry," Nathan began. "Angry?" Sophie laughed, a harsh sound that bordered on hysteria. "I'm beyond angry. I'm furious. I'm confused. I'm terrified. And I can't believe you're sitting there acting like this is somehow normal." Nathan leaned back against his seat, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "I had my reasons. Your reasons?" Sophie's hands clenched into fists in her lap, crushing the delicate lace of her dress. "What possible reason could you have for ruining my life?" Again, something flickered across Nathan's face at that last word. Pain, maybe, or regret. But it was gone so quickly Sophie couldn't be sure. "Gregory Walsh is not who you think he is," Nathan said carefully. "He's dangerous, Sophie. More dangerous than you can imagine. That's ridiculous. Gregory is a respected businessman. He owns half of Chicago's commercial real estate. He's on the board of 3 charities. He's a criminal," Nathan interrupted, his voice hard. "He launders money for some very bad people, Sophie. Drug cartels, human traffickers, arms dealers. That real estate empire of his? It's built on blood money." Sophie stared at him, her mouth open in shock. "That's insane." "You're lying. I wish I were." Nathan pulled out a tablet from the seat pocket and handed it to her. "Look at these documents. Bank records, wire transfers, communications between Gregory and known criminals. It's all there." Sophie's hands shook as she took the tablet, her eyes scanning the documents displayed on the screen. Numbers, names, dates, all laid out in damning detail. But she couldn't accept it. Couldn't believe that the man she had planned to marry was involved in such horrible things. "This could be fake," she said, though her voice lacked conviction. "You could have manufactured all of this," could have, Nathan agreed. "But I didn't. I've spent the last 2 years investigating Gregory Walsh, gathering evidence, building a case against him. And in the process, I discovered something that made my blood run cold." He paused, and Sophie saw genuine fear in his eyes, for the first time since he had taken her. "He knows about us," Nathan continued. "About our past, about what we meant to each other. And he's been using you, Sophie. Using you to get to me." Sophie felt the blood drain from her face. "What are you talking about?" "Gregory doesn't even know you exist. He knows more than you think." Nathan's jaw tightened. "Tell me something. How did you meet Gregory?" Sophie's mind raced back to that night 18 months ago. She had been working a corporate event at one of the city's premier hotels. Gregory had been one of the attendees, charming and attentive. He had asked her out for coffee the next day, and their relationship had developed from there. "I met him at an event," she said slowly. "I was working, he was attending. An event that he specifically requested you coordinate," Nathan said. "He knew who you were before you ever spoke to him, Sophie. He sought you out deliberately." The pieces were starting to fit together in a pattern that made Sophie's stomach churn. But why? Why would he do that? Nathan reached out and took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Because 5 years ago, I had to make the hardest choice of my life. I had to walk away from you to keep you safe. Gregory Walsh was threatening to destroy everyone I loved if I didn't back down from exposing his operations. So I left, disappeared, let him think he had one. You left me because of Gregory? Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. I left you because I loved you too much to let you get hurt. Nathan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand. But I should have known that men like Gregory never really let go of a grudge. He's been watching you all this time, waiting for the perfect moment to use you as leverage against me. Sophie's world tilted on its axis. Everything she thought she knew was crumbling around her. I don't understand. If he wanted to use me against you, why marry me? Because a wife has certain legal protections, Nathan explained. Access to information, inability to testify against a spouse, and because he knew that seeing you marry another man would destroy me in a way that no other revenge could. The SUV turned onto a private road, climbing into wooded hills. Sophie barely noticed the changing landscape outside the windows. Her mind was reeling, trying to process everything Nathan had told her. Where are you taking me? She asked finally. Somewhere safe. Somewhere Gregory can't reach you until I can finish what I started 5 years ago. Nathan met her eyes. I'm going to take him down, Sophie. I'm going to make sure he pays for everything he's done. But I need you to trust me. Sophie looked at him, at the man who had been her first love, her greatest heartbreak, and now her kidnapper. The logical part of her brain screamed that she should be terrified, should be planning her escape. But another part, the part that had never stopped loving Nathan Sterling despite 5 years of silence, wanted desperately to believe him. Trust you? She repeated. You disappeared from my life without explanation. You let me think you didn't love me anymore. You just kidnapped me for my wedding. And now you want me to trust you? Nathan's expression softened. She saw the boy she had fallen in love with beneath the hardened exterior of the man he had become. I know I have no right to ask. But Sophie, I have never stopped loving you. Not for a single day in the last 5 years. Everything I've done, every choice I've made, has been to keep you safe and to create a world where we could be together without fear. The SUV came to a stop in front of a modern glass and timber house nestled in the mountains. Through the windows, Sophie could see stunning views of the Berkshire Hills stretching into the distance. Nathan opened the door and stepped out, then turned to offer her his hand. Sophie sat motionless, her wedding dress pooled around her, her mind a chaos of conflicting emotions. She could refuse to get out. She could demand he take her back to Chicago. She could cling to the life she had planned, the safe and predictable future with Gregory Walsh. Or she could take Nathan's hand and step into the unknown. Trusting the man who claimed to have loved her all along, Sophie looked at his outstretched hand. Then, up at his face, seeing the hope and fear warring in his expression. And in that moment, she realized that despite everything, despite the kidnapping and the revelations and the shattered plans, some part of her had been waiting 5 years for exactly this moment. She placed her hand in his and stepped out into her new reality. The house was stunning. All clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that brought the forest inside. Sophie stood in the vast living room, still in her wedding dress, feeling completely out of place. The afternoon sun streamed through the glass walls, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air like tiny spirits. Everything about this moment felt surreal, like she had stepped through a portal into an alternate universe where nothing made sense. Anymore, Nathan moved through the space with familiar ease. Clearly comfortable in these surroundings, he poured 2 glasses of water from a kitchen, looked like something out of an architectural magazine, and brought one to Sophie. She took it mechanically, her hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline coursing through her system. I know this is overwhelming, Nathan said, setting his own glass down on a sleek coffee table, but you're safe here. This property is registered under a shell corporation that can't be traced back to me. Gregory won't find you, safe, Sophie repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. She set down her water and turned to face him fully, years of hurt and confusion finally boiling over. You keep using that word like it explains everything. Like it justifies kidnapping me from my own wedding and bringing me to the middle of nowhere. It does justify it, Nathan said firmly, his gray eyes intense. If you had married Gregory today, you would have been in danger. Real, immediate danger. From what? A man who brought me flowers every week? Who took me to charity galas and introduced me to his family? Who never raised his voice or his hand to me? Sophie's voice rose with each question. That's the man you're telling me is a dangerous criminal? Nathan pulled out his phone and began scrolling through files. Sit down, Sophie, please. Let me show you what I've found. Against her better judgment, Sophie sat on the edge of a cream-colored sofa, her wedding dress spreading around her like a cloud. Nathan sat beside her, careful to maintain some distance, and handed her his phone. The images that appeared made her stomach turn. Photographs of Gregory in meetings with men who had the unmistakable look of criminals. Documents showing wire transfers to offshore accounts. Police reports about businesses that had mysteriously burned down after refusing to sell to Gregory's real estate empire. Testimony from witnesses who had later recanted their statements or disappeared entirely. This is from the FBI investigation, Nathan explained quietly. They've been building a case against Gregory for 3 years, but he's careful, insulated by layers of legitimate business and expensive lawyers. That's why I had to take matters into my own hands. Sophie's hands shook as she scrolled through the evidence. Each new piece of information was like a hammer blow, shattering the image she had built of the man she had almost married. How long have you known about this? I first learned about Gregory Walsh 6 years ago, Nathan said, his voice taking on a bitter edge. I had just started my tech company, and he approached me about a partnership. Something felt off about his proposal, so I did some digging. What I found terrified me. He stood and walked to the windows, staring out at the forest beyond. At first, I thought I could expose him through legal channels. I gathered evidence, contacted the FBI, did everything by the book. But Gregory has connections everywhere, including inside law enforcement. He found out what I was doing. Sophie watched him, seeing the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands clenched into fists at his sides. What did he do? Nathan turned back to her, and the pain in his eyes made her chest ache. He came to me with a proposition. Stop investigating him. Disappear from your life completely, or watch everyone I loved suffer the consequences. He showed me pictures of my parents, my sister, my college friends, and he showed me pictures of you. The breath caught in Sophie's throat. Me, you, Nathan confirmed. Pictures of you leaving your apartment, sitting in coffee shops, walking through the park. He had been having you followed for weeks, learning your routines, documenting your life. He told me that if I didn't back off, you would have an accident. Nothing that could be traced back to him, of course. Just a random tragedy that would devastate everyone who loved you. Sophie felt cold despite the warm afternoon sun. So you left. I left, Nathan said simply. I wrote you that pathetic note about needing to focus on my career, knowing you would hate me for it. I blocked your number, deleted my social media, and disappeared into my work. I told myself that your hatred was a small price to pay for your safety. I didn't hate you, Sophie whispered. I was heartbroken. I spent months trying to figure out what I had done wrong, what had changed between us. You did nothing wrong, Nathan said fiercely, moving back to sit beside her. Everything that happened was my fault. I should have found another way, should have been stronger, should have trusted you with the truth instead of just vanishing. Sophie looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. And then Gregory found me, and then Gregory found you, Nathan echoed. I didn't know about it at first. I had buried myself in work, building my company, trying to forget the woman I loved. Then, about 2 years ago, a friend sent me a link to a Society page article about Chicago's most eligible bachelor Gregory Walsh and his new girlfriend. A talented event coordinator named Sophie Bennett pulled up a photo on his phone and showed it to Sophie. She remembered that night clearly. It had been one of Gregory's charity events, and the photographer had caught them dancing together. Sophie looked happy in the picture, smiling up at Gregory. But now, looking at it with new eyes, she could see the calculation in Gregory's expression. The way he held her like a possession rather than a partner. I nearly lost my mind when I saw that photo, Nathan continued. I couldn't believe the coincidence. But the more I investigated, the more I realized it wasn't a coincidence at all. Gregory had sought you out deliberately. He knew exactly who you were and what you meant to me. But how? Sophie asked. We were so careful back then. We didn't post about our relationship online, didn't broadcast it to the world. Nathan smiled sadly. We weren't as subtle as we thought. Remember that weekend we spent at my family's cabin in Wisconsin? The one where I told you I loved you for the first time? Sophie nodded, the memory still vivid, despite the years that had passed. They had spent 3 perfect days hiking, cooking together, and talking about their dreams for the future. It had been the happiest weekend of her life. My sister took a photo of us that weekend, Nathan said. Just a candid shot of us sitting on the dock at sunset. She posted it to her private Instagram account with a caption about being happy that I had found someone special. Gregory's people must have found it during their background check on me. They put the pieces together. Sophie felt a chill run down her spine. He's been planning this for years, Nathan confirmed. Courting you, winning your trust, proposing marriage. All of it carefully orchestrated to hurt me while simultaneously binding you to him legally. But why? Sophie stood abruptly, her dress rustling with the movement. She began pacing the room, trying to make sense of the twisted logic. Why go to such elaborate lengths? If he wanted revenge on you for investigating him, there are simpler ways. Because I didn't just stop investigating him, Nathan said. After I left you, I channeled all my pain and anger into bringing Gregory down. I went deeper underground, built connections with international law enforcement, and started gathering evidence that even his expensive lawyers couldn't dismiss. 6 months ago, I delivered a complete dossier to the FBI that linked him to 17 different criminal organizations. Nathan stood and walked to a desk in the corner of the room. He pulled out a thick folder and brought it to Sophie. Gregory knows his empire is crumbling. The FBI is closing in, his business partners are getting nervous, and his protection is eroding. Marrying you was his insurance policy. Insurance? Sophie opened the folder, seeing page after page of legal documents. If he married you, he could claim that any evidence I brought against him was fabricated out of jealousy, Nathan explained. A jilted ex-boyfriend trying to ruin his former girlfriend's happiness. It would cast doubt on everything I've worked to build. Plus, as his wife, you couldn't be compelled to testify against him. Sophie sank back onto the sofa, the folder falling from her nerveless fingers. I was a pawn. In both of your games, I was just a pawn. No, Nathan said sharply, dropping to his knees in front of her. You were never a pawn to me, Sophie. You were everything. You are everything. Every decision I made was to protect you, not to use you. But you didn't trust me enough to let me make my own choices, Sophie said, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. You decided what was best for me, without even asking what I wanted. Case's face crumpled. You're right. I was arrogant and stupid and terrified of losing you. But Sophie, if I had told you the truth 5 years ago, what would you have done? Sophie opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. Because she knew exactly what she would have done. She would have insisted on staying with Nathan, on facing the danger together. She would have believed that love could conquer anything, that they could outsmart Gregory Walsh and his criminal connections, and she probably would have gotten herself killed. That's what I thought, Nathan said softly, reading her expression. You would have tried to be brave, tried to stand with me against someone who has no conscience and unlimited resources, and Gregory would have hurt you just to prove a point. Sophie wiped her tears away with shaking hands. So what now? You've kidnapped me from my wedding, revealed that my fiancé is a criminal mastermind, and brought me to a secret hideaway in the mountains. What's your endgame here, Nathan? I keep you safe while the FBI executes their raid, Nathan said. They're moving against Gregory tonight. By tomorrow morning, he'll be in custody, and you'll be free to return to your life. Return to what life? Sophie laughed bitterly. My apartment is probably packed up by now, since I was supposed to move into Gregory's penthouse after the honeymoon. My job is gone because I was planning to quit and focus on charity work. My friends and family think I've lost my mind or been murdered. What life am I supposed to return to? Nathan reached for her hands, but she pulled them away. I'll help you rebuild. Whatever you need, I'll provide it. Money, connections, a new apartment, anything. I don't want your money, Sophie said coldly. I don't want your guilt or your protection or your grand gestures. I just want the truth. No more secrets. No more decisions made for my own good without my input. Nathan sat back on his heels, studying her face. What do you want to know? Everything, Sophie said. Start with why you really left me 5 years ago. The whole story, not just the sanitized version where you're the noble hero protecting the helpless woman. Nathan winced at her tone but nodded. Okay, the truth is that I was terrified. Gregory didn't just threaten you. He showed me what he was capable of. There was a journalist who had been investigating his operations, a man named David Chen. David had a wife and 2 young daughters. He paused, his face going pale. Gregory's people burned down their house while the family slept inside. Made it look like an electrical fire. David and his wife died, but the daughters survived. Gregory sent me photos of those little girls in the hospital, covered in bandages, and told me that was what happened to people who got in his way. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God. I couldn't let that happen to you, Nathan continued, his voice rough with emotion. I couldn't risk your life just because I was too proud or too stubborn to back down. So I made the choice to hurt you in a way that would keep you alive. I told myself that you would get over me eventually, find someone better, live a happy life. But you kept watching me, Sophie said, understanding dawning. You never really let go. Nathan shook his head. I couldn't. I hired a private security firm to keep discreet tabs on you, make sure you were safe. I saw you struggle after I left. Saw you slowly rebuild your life. I watched from a distance, hating myself but knowing it was for the best. Until Gregory found me. Until Gregory found me, Nathan agreed. When I realized what he was doing, I wanted to storm back into your life immediately, warn you, beg you to leave him, but I knew you wouldn't believe me. We hadn't spoken in 3 years by then. Why would? You trust the man who had broken your heart over the charming billionaire who was sweeping you off your feet. Sophie had to admit he was right. If Nathan had approached her a year ago with wild accusations about Gregory, she would have thought he was jealous or delusional. Gregory had been so careful, so convincing in his role as the perfect boyfriend. So I bided my time, Nathan continued. I accelerated my investigation, worked with the FBI to build an ironclad case. And I watched you fall deeper under Gregory's spell, watched him isolate you from your old friends, watched him slowly take control of your life. It was torture. He was controlling, Sophie admitted quietly, thinking back over the past 18 months. I thought he was just protective, traditional. But he always had opinions about what I wore, who I spent time with, how I spent my money. He never actually forbade me from doing anything, but he had ways of making me feel guilty or anxious if I didn't follow his suggestions. That's how men like Gregory operate, Nathan said. They don't need to use obvious force. They manipulate and gaslight and gradually erode your sense of self until you don't even realize you're trapped. A sudden thought struck Sophie. My father. He asked me this morning if I was sure about the wedding. He seemed worried. Did you talk to him? Nathan had the grace to look embarrassed. I sent him an anonymous package 2 weeks ago. Nothing detailed, just enough information to raise questions about Gregory's business practices. I was hoping he might convince you to postpone the wedding by me more time to execute the FBI operation. You manipulated my father, Sophie said flatly. I gave him information he deserved to have before his daughter married a criminal, Nathan corrected. I'm sorry I couldn't be more direct, but I was running out of options. The FBI wasn't going to wait much longer, and I couldn't let you become Gregory's wife. Sophie stood and walked to the windows, looking out at the forest that surrounded the house. Birds flitted between the trees, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear running water. It was peaceful here, isolated from the chaos of her former life. What happens now? She asked without turning around. You said the FBI is raiding Gregory's properties tonight. What does that mean for us? It means that by tomorrow morning you'll be free, Nathan said. Free from Gregory, free from this house, free from me if that's what you want. Sophie turned to face him, and if I don't want to be free from you, hope flared in Nathan's eyes before he quickly tamped it down. Sophie, don't make any decisions right now. You're in shock. You've been through a traumatic experience. You need time to process everything that's happened. Not telling me what I need, Sophie said, moving toward him. Stop making decisions for me. I'm a grown woman, Nathan. I'm capable of knowing my own mind. I know that, Nathan said. But I also know that Stockholm Syndrome is real, and that you're vulnerable right now, and that I've already hurt you enough without taking advantage of your confusion. Sophie stopped directly in front of him, so close she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. You want to know what I'm confused about? I'm confused about why the man I loved more than anything in the world thought so little of me, so that he couldn't trust me with the truth. I'm confused about how I could have spent 18 months with Gregory and never seen the monster underneath. But I'm not confused about one thing. What's that? Nathan's voice was barely a whisper. I'm not confused about the fact that when you walked into that church and took me away, part of me was relieved, Sophie admitted. Part of me had been waiting for exactly that to happen, for someone to give me permission to stop pretending I was happy. Sophie's breath caught. Sophie. I'm not saying I forgive you, she continued quickly. I'm not saying we can just pick up where we left off 5 years ago. But I am saying that I deserve to be part of the conversation about what happens next. Not kept in the dark for my own protection. Not managed like a child who can't handle reality. You're right, Nathan said. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry for making decisions without you. It won't happen again. Promise? Sophie asked. Promise, Nathan confirmed. Before either of them could say more, Nathan's phone buzzed with an urgent message. He glanced at the screen and his expression turned grim. What is it? Why? Sophie asked, fear creeping back into her voice. We have a problem, Nathan said. Gregory escaped the FBI raid, and according to my sources, he's heading this way. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sophie felt her blood turn to ice as Nathan's fingers flew across his phone screen, his jaw clenched tight with tension. How's that possible? Sophie demanded, her voice rising with panic. You said this place couldn't be traced. You said I was safe here. Nathan was already moving toward a panel on the wall that Sophie hadn't noticed before. He pressed his palm against it. It slid open to reveal a sophisticated security system with multiple monitors showing different angles of the property. I don't know how he found us, but we need to assume he'll be here within the hour, maybe less. Sophie watched the monitors, seeing nothing but peaceful forest and the empty driveway snaking through the trees. It looked so serene, so safe. The disconnect between the tranquil imagery and the danger racing toward them made her feel dizzy. We need to leave, she said, gathering up the voluminous skirts of her wedding dress. Right now. We can take your car and go somewhere else, somewhere he won't find us. He has people watching every major road out of this area, Nathan said, his eyes scanning data that was scrolling across one of the screens. The FBI lost track of him 20 minutes ago. He could have helicopters, drones, anything.
Oh.
Running right now would be walking into a trap. So we just wait here for him to arrive? Sophie's voice cracked with fear and frustration. That's your plan? The great Nathan Sterling, tech billionaire and master strategist, is going to sit here and wait to be caught. Her, and the intensity in his gray eyes, made her take a step back. No, we're going to end this. Tonight. Once and for all. He moved to a locked cabinet and pulled out what looked like a laptop but was clearly something more sophisticated. His fingers danced across the keyboard as Sophie watched, feeling utterly helpless in her ridiculous wedding gown. What are you doing? She asked, calling in backup. Nathan replied without looking up. I have people who owe me favors. It's people who can get here before Gregory does if we're lucky. And if we're not lucky, Nathan finally looked at her, and she saw something fierce and protective in his expression. Then I fight, and you run. There's a tunnel that leads from the basement to a safe house 2 miles north. If things go wrong, that's your escape route. I'm not leaving you, Sophie said immediately. Yes, you are, Nathan countered. If Gregory gets his hands on you, he'll use you as leverage. He'll hurt you to hurt me. I won't let that happen. Sophie crossed her arms, her wedding dress rustling with the movement. You don't get to make that choice for me anymore, remember? We just had this conversation. I stay, we face this together, or we both run. Those are your options, Sophie. This isn't a game. Gregory's dangerous. He's desperate. Desperate men do terrible things. I know that better than anyone, Sophie shot back. I almost married him. Almost let him trap me in a life where I would have been completely under his control. So don't tell me I don't understand the danger. I understand it perfectly. But I also understand that I'm tired of being the damsel in distress. I'm tired of men making decisions about my life without asking me what I want. Nathan stared at her for a long moment, and Sophie saw the exact second when he realized she wasn't going to back down. A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth, despite the gravity of their situation. You've changed, he said softly. You're stronger than you were 5 years ago. I had to be, Sophie replied. After you left, I had to rebuild myself from nothing. I learned that I don't need a man to save me. That doesn't mean I don't want a partner to stand beside me. Before Nathan could respond, an alert sounded from the security system. Both of them turned to the monitors, where 3 black SUVs were visible approaching the property on the access road. That was fast, Nathan muttered, his expression darkening. Too fast. He must have known where we were before I even brought you here. The implication hit Sophie like a physical blow. You have a leak. Someone on your team told Gregory about this place. It's the only explanation, Nathan agreed grimly. He pulled out his phone and made a quick call. The backup isn't going to get here in time. We need a new plan. Sophie's mind was racing. Years of coordinating complex events kicking into high gear. How many people does he have? Based on the vehicles, probably 10 to 12 men, Nathan said. Watching the monitors as the SUVs pulled up to the house, and armed men began emerging. And you have weapons here? Nathan nodded toward the cabinet he had opened earlier. Enough to make a stand, but not enough to win against those numbers. Sophie studied the monitors, an idea forming in her mind. What if we don't fight them? What if we give them what they want? Nathan looked at her sharply. Absolutely not. I'm not handing you over to Gregory. Not me, Sophie said. Information. Gregory didn't come here just to get me back. He came here to silence you before the FBI can use your evidence against him. What if we convince him you've destroyed all the evidence in exchange for our freedom? He'll never believe that, Nathan said. He will if I'm the one who tells him, Sophie insisted. Her heart was pounding, but her mind was clear. This was the kind of high-stakes negotiation she had handled dozens of times in her event planning career, just with slightly higher consequences. He thinks I'm naive, easy to manipulate. If I go out there and tell him I convinced you to destroy the evidence so we could be together, he might buy it. And then what? He just lets us walk away. Nathan shook his head. Gregory doesn't leave loose ends, Sophie. Even if he believed the evidence was gone, he would still kill us both. Sophie moved closer to Nathan, taking his hands in hers. Not if we make him think he needs us alive. Not if we convince him that the evidence is set to automatically release unless we check in every 24 hours with a code only we know. Nathan's eyes widened as he understood what she was proposing. A dead man's switch. It could work, but it would have to be convincing. One slip and he'll know we're bluffing. Then we don't slip, Sophie said, with more confidence than she felt. We sell it perfectly because our lives depend on it. The sound of footsteps on the wooden deck outside made them both freeze. A voice called out, smooth and familiar, sending chills down Sophie's spine. Sophie, darling, I know you're in there. Come out and let's talk about this like civilized people. Gregory, the man she had almost married, the man who had fooled her so completely, was standing outside with armed men ready to kill her, and Nathan squeezed her hands. Are you sure about this? Sophie thought about everything she had been through. The heartbreak of losing Nathan 5 years ago. The slow erosion of her independence during her relationship with Gregory. The terror of being kidnapped from her wedding. All of it had led to this moment where she could either be a victim or take control of her own fate. I'm sure, she said firmly. Let's go face the devil. They walked to the front door together. Nathan opened it slowly, keeping Sophie slightly behind him despite her protests. Gregory stood on the deck, immaculate in a tailored suit, flanked by 4 armed men. His handsome face wore an expression of concern that Sophie now recognized as completely fake. Sophie, thank God you're all right, Gregory said, taking a step forward. His men moved with him, hands on their weapons. When this lunatic kidnapped you from our wedding, I thought I'd lost you forever. She knows, Nathan said flatly. She knows everything about you, Gregory. The money laundering, the connections to cartels, all of it. Oh, Gregory's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the cold calculation underneath. I'm sure this man has filled your head with all sorts of lies, darling. He's obsessed with you. He's been stalking you for years. That's why I had to take precautions. Protect you from his delusions. Sophie stepped forward, moving out from behind Nathan's protective stance. He showed me the evidence, Gregory. Bank records, wire transfers, testimony from witnesses. I saw everything. It's evidence that can be fabricated, Gregory said smoothly, but his eyes had gone hard. Evidence that means nothing without context. The FBI seems to think it means quite a lot, Sophie said. That's why they raided your properties tonight. That's why you're here instead of turning yourself in like an innocent man would. Gregory's pleasant expression vanished completely, replaced by something ugly and dangerous. So that's how it is. You choose him over me. After everything I've done for you, everything I've given you. You didn't give me anything, Sophie said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You tried to buy me, control me, use me. But I'm not for sale, Gregory. And I'm definitely not going to be your insurance policy against prosecution." Gregory pulled a gun from inside his jacket. And suddenly all his men had their weapons drawn and pointed at Nathan and Sophie. "You stupid girl. I could have given you the world. Instead, you're going to die in the middle of nowhere with your pathetic excuse for a boyfriend. Shoot us, and the evidence goes public immediately," Nathan said calmly, though Sophie could feel the tension radiating from him. "I set up a dead man's switch. If I don't enter a code every 24 hours, everything I've collected on you gets sent to every major news outlet, law enforcement agency, and criminal organization you've ever wronged. Your life will be over." Gregory studied Nathan carefully, trying to determine if he was bluffing. "Show me." Nathan pulled out his phone slowly and opened an app. Sophie caught a glimpse of what looked like a countdown timer set for 23 hours and 17 minutes. He had actually set up the dead man's switch while she had been changing out of her wedding dress earlier. "See for yourself," Nathan said, holding up the phone. "Kill us, and you become the most wanted man in America within hours. You'll have both law enforcement and your former partners hunting you down." Gregory's hand tightened on his gun, and for a terrible moment, Sophie thought he might shoot them anyway out of pure rage. But then, his expression cleared, and he laughed, a cold sound that had no humor in it. "Clever," he admitted. "Very clever. So what do you want? Money? A head start? What's the price for my freedom?" "We want you to turn yourself in," Sophie said. "Cooperate with the FBI. Tell them everything you know about your criminal partners. In exchange, Nathan won't release the additional evidence he's gathered. The evidence that would ensure you never see the light of day again. You want me to become a rat?" Gregory said flatly. "We want you to face justice," Nathan corrected. "You've hurt too many people, destroyed too many lives. It ends tonight, one way or another." Gregory was quiet for a long moment, his mind clearly working through the angles. Sophie held her breath, aware that everything hinged on this decision. If Gregory chose to shoot them anyway, betting that the dead man's switch was a bluff, so they would have no backup plan. Finally, Gregory lowered his gun. "All right, you win this round. But understand something, both of you. Men like me don't stay in prison. I have resources, connections, friends in very high places. Whatever deal the FBI offers me, I'll take it. I'll serve a few years in some minimum security facility, and then I'll be free again. And when that day comes, I'll remember this moment. I'll remember how you betrayed me, Sophie. How you chose him over me. Didn't choose him over you," Sophie said quietly. "I chose myself. I chose freedom and truth over the comfortable lie you were selling me. That's what you'll never understand, Gregory. Love isn't about ownership. It's about choice. And I choose to be with someone who sees me as an equal partner, not a possession to be controlled." Gregory's face twisted with rage, but before he could respond, the sound of helicopter rotors filled the air. Everyone looked up to see two black helicopters descending toward the property, FBI markings clearly visible on their sides. "Looks like my backup arrived after all," Nathan said with satisfaction. "You're out of time, Gregory. Put down your weapons and surrender, or this ends very badly for you and your men." Gregory looked between Nathan, Sophie, and the helicopters, calculating his rapidly dwindling options. Finally, he threw his gun down on the deck with a clatter. "Stand down," he ordered his men. "It's over." The next hour was a blur of activity. FBI agents swarmed the property, taking Gregory and his men into custody. Sophie and Nathan gave statements, handed over evidence, and watched as the man who had nearly destroyed both their lives was led away in handcuffs. As the last helicopter lifted off, carrying Gregory toward his reckoning with justice, Sophie and Nathan stood together on the deck, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I can't believe it's actually over," Sophie said softly. "It's not completely over," Nathan said. "There will be trials, testimony, probably months of legal proceedings." Gregory was right about one thing. Men with his resources don't go down easily, but we'll face it together, Sophie said, turning to look at him. "Right? No more secrets. No more protecting me from the truth." Nathan pulled her into his arms, and Sophie melted into his embrace, feeling safe for the first time in 5 years. Together, he promised. I meant what I said earlier, Sophie. I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. I never stopped loving you either, Sophie admitted. Even when I thought I had moved on, even when I was with Gregory, part of me was still that girl standing on your parents' dock watching the sunset. Nathan pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. I wasted 5 years of our lives because I was too afraid to trust you with the truth. I'm not going to waste any more time. Sophie Bennett, will you give me another chance? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your love? Sophie smiled, tears streaming down her face. On one condition. Anything, Nathan said. No more grand gestures. No more dramatic rescues or secret plans. Just honesty, communication, and treating me like the capable woman I am. Can you do that? Nathan laughed, the sound full of joy and relief. I can do that. I promise you, Sophie. From this moment forward, we face everything as equals. Your voice matters. Your choices matter. You matter more than anything else in this world. Then yes, Sophie said. I'll give you another chance. I'll give us another chance. Nathan kissed her as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. It was a kiss that held 5 years of longing, months of fear, and the promise of a future they would build together. When they finally pulled apart, Sophie looked down at her wedding dress, still somehow pristine, despite everything they had been through. I guess I won't be needing this anymore. I don't know, Nathan said with a teasing smile. You look pretty amazing in it. Maybe we could find another use for it. Sophie raised an eyebrow. Nathan Sterling, are you proposing to me? Not yet, Nathan said. But someday, when the time is right, when we've rebuilt the trust that I broke, I'm going to ask you properly, and this time you'll actually make it to the altar. I'll hold you to that, Sophie said, taking his hand. They walked back into the house together, ready to begin the long process of healing and rebuilding. Outside, the stars were beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, each one a promise of possibility. Sophie knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be trials to endure, wounds to heal, and a relationship to rebuild from the ground up. But for the first time in 5 years, she felt genuinely hopeful about the future. She had faced her demons, stood up for herself, and chosen love over fear. She had discovered that she didn't need to be rescued because she was strong enough to save herself. And she had learned that real love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices. It was about showing up every day, being honest even when it hurt, and choosing each other over and over again. As they sat together in the quiet house, Nathan's arm around her shoulders and her head resting on his chest, Sophie thought about the wedding that never was. She had walked down the aisle toward a man who wanted to own her, but she had been carried away by a man who loved her enough to let her be free. In the end, perhaps the kidnapping had been the greatest gift Nathan could have given her, not because it had saved her from Gregory, but because it had forced her to confront the truth about her own strength and resilience. What are you thinking about? Nathan asked, his voice rumbling in his chest. I'm thinking that I'm glad you kidnapped me, Sophie said with a laugh. Is that crazy? Maybe a little, Nathan admitted. But I understand what you mean, sometimes. We need to have our lives completely disrupted to realize we were on the wrong path. No more disruptions, though, Sophie said firmly. From now on, we build something stable and honest and real. Deal, Nathan agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell completely over the mountains. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Questions from family and friends, media attention as Gregory's empire collapsed, and the difficult work of building a relationship on a foundation of truth rather than secrets. But tonight, they had each other. They had survived. And they had chosen love. 6 months later, Sophie stood in a small art gallery in downtown Chicago, surrounded by friends and family. The exhibition was modest, but meaningful, showcasing photographs from various events she had coordinated over the years alongside new work that reflected her journey of self-discovery. Nathan stood beside her, his hand warm in hers, as they listened to people discuss her work. He had kept his promise.
Oh.
No more grand gestures. No more secrets. Just steady support, honest communication, and the kind of partnerships Sophie had always dreamed of. Gregory was in federal prison awaiting trial, his empire dismantled, his reputation destroyed. The FBI had offered him a deal in exchange for testimony against his criminal associates. But the case against him was so strong that even with cooperation, He was looking at decades behind bars. Sophie no longer feared him. She had testified before the grand jury with her head held high, reclaiming the narrative of her own life. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Nathan pulled Sophie aside to a quiet corner of the gallery. "I have something for you," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. Sophie's heart skipped a beat. "Nathan, is this what you think?" he said quickly. "We agreed we'd take our time, and I meant that. This is something else." He opened the box to reveal a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a tiny compass. "I wanted you to have this," Nathan explained, as he fastened it around her wrist. "As a reminder that you always know which direction you need to go. You don't need me or anyone else to guide you. You have your own internal compass, your own strength. I'm just grateful that your path has crossed with mine again." Sophie looked at the bracelet, then at Nathan, and felt her eyes fill with tears. "It's perfect. You're perfect," Nathan said softly. "And when the time comes, when we're both ready, I'm going to ask you to marry me properly. No kidnapping required." Sophie laughed through her tears. "I'm going to hold you to that." As they left the gallery together, walking hand in hand through the Chicago streets where their story had begun so many years ago, Sophie felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had been kidnapped on her wedding day only to discover that the man behind it was the billionaire she had once loved. But more importantly, she had discovered her own strength, her own voice, her own ability to choose the life she wanted to live. And in the end, that was the greatest love story of all. The compass charm caught the streetlight as they walked, right, pointing steadily forward toward a future built on truth, trust, and the kind of love that sets you free rather than holding you captive. Sophie smiled and squeezed Nathan's hand. She was exactly where she was meant to be. The end.